So, folks, it's time for another AMA with Hearthstone's developer, Iksar. He's been doing these every week, taking to Twitter to answer some tough questions sometimes. So, shout out to Iksar for continuing to do this. Really appreciate him taking time to talk to people and share insights on the game. It's not easy to do on Twitter, put yourself out there, so deserve some props as far as I'm concerned. And this time around has some really interesting tidbits again about things like 2v2 mode, Warlock's hero power getting changed, what the classic and basic rework's gonna look like. Few very interesting tidbits to break down. So let's go ahead and jump into them, starting off with the first one since it's already right here on screen. Impact, cool dude, asks, can you leak anything about the upcoming basic or classic redo, now forever titled the Basic set? And Iksar says there will be some new cards, some old cards, and some rebalanced cards. But we decided not to bring back Barnes. Well, there is a god above if that's the case. Hearthstone gods, Bidbroder looking after us there. No more Barnes, but a few interesting tidbits there. So new cards. That means we're getting like totally newly designed cards, it sounds like, for basic and classic. So presumably replacing some of what we know now, but that's awesome. I love new cards. Love talking about new cards. New designs are cool. We're going to get some old cards, which I think could mean one of two things. It might just mean like cards that are already in basic and classic, like just, the old set that it is right now. So just, keeping it sort of the same for at least a chunk of it. And then it could also mean cards from like Wild, like bringing in old rotated cards into basic or classic as sort of a core set, as people have teased. That would be pretty cool. I'd love to see some staple. There's a lot of staple Hearthstone characters, for instance, like the Lich King, who rotated out of standard format, and he kind of feels like he should be a part of the core Hearthstone experience. So getting cards like the Lich King back, I think, would be awesome. And then finally, some rebalanced cards as well. So that sounds like taking basic and classic cards and tweaking them to make them stronger or weaker. There are definitely a lot of basic and classic cards that feel really low power level compared to what's happening in Hearthstone today. So they're just not impactful. There's a lot of like entire sets of class cards or, chunks of class cards that don't even feel useful. You just skip right past them in the collection manager. So that's exciting to know that's maybe some of these are going to get a second chance. I think that's really cool. And it sounds like, it's more than just a rework altogether. It's going to have new cards, card swaps, probably, and some balance changes too. So I'm even more excited about the classic rework, classic redo, whatever you want to call it, core set, as some people theorize. More excited than ever before. That said, I'm curious what you guys think. What are the old cards they should bring back to classic? Like what rotated cards, if that's what he means, should indeed be returning to Hearthstone? They also go on here a little bit. I think there was another comment of some sort. Dean said no spoilers. Oh, and then specifically Naga Sea Witch is not coming back. Okay, so that actually adds to the theory that it is old cards that have rotated. Naga Sea Witch being a rotated card, him saying she's not coming back implies maybe another old card could come back. So that's an interesting follow-up on that one. But nonetheless, some big changes coming for the classic rework. All right, so this is a very neat topic to discuss. I can't believe Dean actually answered this. And man, he did it really well, like super honest and forthright, and just this is a baller response as far as I'm concerned. So Bane says, I think a lot of players are realizing now that the new reward system is actually more generous than Reddit would have had you believe 3 months ago. What are your thoughts on that whole saga in retrospect? That is the kind of question that would be so easy to avoid, just because it's a lot of traps there potentially. But Deed comes at it, and I have to say, I actually agree with the sentiment. Based on what you guys are kind of saying and vocalizing in Twitch chat, even in YouTube comments, and based on my own experiences, I have way more gold than I would normally have. I think that's primarily because I do play a lot of Battlegrounds and off stream. And Battlegrounds before would never get me meaningful rewards, and now I actually do get pretty meaningful rewards for Battlegrounds. So if you're somebody who's not just hardcore grinding aggro decks in standard format 12 hours a day, and you're kind of getting the full Hearthstone experience across different game modes, it feels like the new reward system is dramatically better for those people. And it's just that really tiny subset of people who maybe still have kind of an equal reward system, or sometimes in some cases still a worse reward system, which I don't think we believed initially, but I think a lot of people are starting to buy in that, hey, actually the rewards are pretty cool. This is not too bad. That said, I still maintain Hearthstone should be notably cheaper than it is. I think this is a step in the right direction, but still a fairly small step. In particular, I feel like packs and dust need a look to make them more rewarding, so that when you spend money or you spend your dust, you feel like you're getting a good return on those currencies. All that said, though, that's just the context. So let's read Iksar's comments here, and probably in full if you haven't already started yourself. Dean says, I was pretty surprised by the initial outpouring of distaste for the system. Even in its launched form, I think most players would find they were earning more. It just wasn't 100% of all theoretical cases, and it was a minor amount more. I learned that clarity matters a lot when it comes to rewards, especially if players have felt burned by the system in the past. Unless it's easy for someone with limited understanding to know that your new system is better, they probably won't see it that way. I think that's really important. Just making sure the communication is very obvious and very clear. And that was a big problem. People felt a bit misled because they were like, oh, everybody's going to earn more. And that wasn't exactly the case. So suddenly we start picking and doubting and wondering like what's really going on. And also you have to run all these Excel spreadsheets and do all this crazy math to understand that the system is better. That lacks clarity. That's a big problem and a big hurdle for people to get over. So I'm glad Dean calls that out as a mistake that Blizzard made. And also recognizes that people do feel burned by the system in the past. Like that's an important thing as well. Like when you already have this sort of distrust building up over years of a super expensive game, it's hard to sometimes trust that positive changes are real. So two really, really important recognitions there. Dean also says, thinking that we were just going to hold back a bunch of rewards to give away later in events or through other fashions gave us flexibility to learn about how people engaged. But I think we were blindsided about how much that flexibility was going to cost us. So initially, before they added in all the extra rewards, they were going to do that in events and stuff, and that kind of backloaded and delayed people's expectations for what the system was going to be, and that was obviously a bad thing. And Dean says, as the person responsible for a lot of that decision making, it's mostly on me. It's a shame because I think the players and dev in this case were mostly aligned on what felt like a rewarding amount of stuff. So some issues in execution, some in communication. If I could redo from scratch, I'm not 100% sure doing XP for playing was the right call. Makes the system much more complicated with questionable upside. So, man, really just, calling into question exactly how this whole system worked. I love how, understanding and somewhat repentant and just aware this whole thread is from Dean. It's so awesome to have this much self-awareness and taking responsibility for it. That's so cool. And he says, we're in a reasonable place now, though, still going to improve in next expansion. So I'm interested to hear what that means exactly, but sounds like maybe the rewards track could be chopped up into smaller chunks, kind of like the post level 50 experience, which definitely feels a lot better. You can be sure it's going to be extra clear that whatever changes we make are positive with little to no room for misinterpretation. That's awesome. And Dean goes on to say, it sounds a lot like I'm blaming players for not getting it, but it really is on us. Players shouldn't have to break out their Excel sheets to understand something. It should just be clear right away. So, I mean, that's just such an awesome response, like such a great, detailed, thorough, reflective response. It makes me so much happier and like trusting in the future changes, because acknowledging mistakes and, taking steps to fix them is exactly what you should do when things go wrong. So absolute home run as far as I'm concerned. Props to Dean for tackling that one. That's tough. I'm curious what you guys think. Does this make you feel better, more trusting? Do you think it's enough? Do you think the changes in the future will be there? Do you think the rewards track does indeed feel better? Or you still think it's insufficient for Hearthstone's economy? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I think it's better. I think it's working really well for a lot of people, but Hearthstone still needs to be notably cheaper if we really want the game to thrive and bring back players and bring in new players. So that's my take. So this one's cool. Somebody asked, is the design team working on moving away from multiple degrees of random deviation? In other words, like a random card that generates a random card that generates a random card, things like lackeys and so on and so forth. And Iksar says, generally, we are moving away from having too many resources in one card. Control matchups, I think, are most compelling when they are filled with big bomb cards. When control matchups devolve into one infinite generator and 29 removal cards, the game gets less fun. And I thoroughly agree with that. Like, this is the thing we see in Priest, where Priest just runs a bunch of control cards and then Galakrond just makes them infinite stuff, and they don't really need to balance resources or consider resources at all. And various other decks do the exact same thing. So those old like grindy control games where it's like, I have to use this shield slam for this exact threat, and that's going to make sure I get an advantage in this matchup. That doesn't exist anymore. It's just like, well, yeah, I don't know. They're going to have 44 more minions if I just keep playing. So just going to throw away all my resources. And the kind of careful consideration for how a game unfolds in a control matchup doesn't exist anymore. It's just like, well, yeah, whoever gets the cooler randomly generated thing is going to win this control matchup. So that is an awesome thing to hear. I would love to go back to the point where resources really do matter, and playing for attrition and playing for true control is a real Hearthstone archetype again. So yippee. So this one's pretty intriguing. Malicious Falcon says, do you think the Warlock class could still get a new hero power this far into the game's life cycle? And Iksar says, I think that ship has sailed. We did consider it sometime around the Karazhan timeline or maybe earlier. That's pretty crazy to me that they considered changing Warlock's hero power. Voice said Warlock's hero power is, I think, far and away the strongest, just being able to draw cards that reliably with very little downside, because health often doesn't matter too much to Warlock, particularly more aggressive game plans like Zoo, where you can just reload, small threat after small threat thanks to your hero power. That's been a dominant playstyle in Hearthstone throughout the entire lifespan of the game. That's why Zoo Warlock is always a fairly viable deck and sometimes one of the best decks in the game. And he goes on to add, we were worried we could just never make medium power level, low mana neutral cards because Warlock took advantage of them too well. And that's exactly what we've seen, where Warlock just takes whatever random kind of low cost minions, and as long as they're halfway decent, can throw them in a Zoo deck and make it work really well. And I think that's interesting that they actually did consider changing the hero power. It's so much stronger. They actually thought about tweaking it. I think it also sometimes limits what you can give Warlock as far as their own cards are concerned, because you got the same problem. Like, anytime they're able to reload into really efficient threats, and anytime you try to give them prioritized card draw, some of those things just don't really fly because Warlock's already so good at doing that. But what do you guys think? Should Warlock's hero power still be changed, or is it fine at this stage? I think it's fine at this stage. We kind of figured it out. It's been long enough now that so used to it. I agree. It's too late to make that change. All right, so for this one, somebody asked, is the lack of hero cards this standard year intentional? What caused you to move away from this type of design? So I guess the last hero card we got was, Amazing Reno in Galakrond's Awakening? I think that's right. Am I forgetting one? We had all the Galakrons right before that as well. I'm looking at card types right now on the website here. Yeah, Amazing Reno and Galakron are the only standard format hero cards. So it has been over a year now since basically we've seen a hero card. And Dean says, we will do them again, just wanted to take a break. They are a big enough deal to us that we'd want them to represent major characters and be part of the metagame. That said, if hero cards are a huge part of every meta, it can detract from the excitement. I mean, hey, that's a reasonable take. I'm actually probably more pro hero cards. I'd like one every set. I think they're really cool, and they feel so big and awesome. And I actually really liked the full set of hero cards we got with, say, the Death Knight hero cards and Knights of the Frozen Throne. Just thematically and flavor-wise, that was just an absolute awesome experience. Like, yes, some of them were broken, of course. That wasn't always fun to play against. Blood Reaver Golden comes to mind. Sometimes Deathstalker Rexar, but it just felt so cool and big and awesome. So I wouldn't mind seeing that again, but it's just hard to balance those hero powers. You got to make them good enough to matter, but then they often just end up being absurd. And that said, one or two is fine. I'll take it. Hopefully we get one this next set, actually. It's been a while, so maybe the break he mentions has already happened. It'd be weird to not get a card type for more than a year, because it is one of only 5 card types in Hearthstone. We got spells, minions, hero cards, and weapons. 4 card types. You could maybe count Legendary Quest as something sort of unique, but they're still spells. So yeah, it'd be weird to go too long without a hero card. I hope we get one soon. I like them a lot. This is nifty. Question about cosmetics on cards. I like the idea of the alternate art on the coins, but it seems so far very limited. Only the coin is kind of little compared to what that could be. Do you plan on expanding that concept? And Iksar says, we've considered. We'll probably do it in some limited capacity. Eventually players play, but just looking at visual cues by just looking at visual cues. I think that's intended to say, would hate for you to have to read every card forever because there were so many different visuals. I do really recognize that. Like, it's nice to just kind of be able to play on the fly and not have to hover over stuff and check everything. It's like, wait, what is that artwork? For people like us, you and me, who are super into the game and pay attention to everything, we would obviously know the alternate arts just fine. But for new players, returning players, it could be kind of confusing or trippy. That's another thing with hero powers too. Everybody wants the hero powers to be matched up to the hero portrait, so some of them look weird from a color standpoint or just don't match the character. And it's the same thing. Like, hero powers have that very iconic visual that you recognize, and that has a lot of gameplay value for new and returning players. So I get the hesitation here. That said, Iksar goes on to add, I think as long as the moments of new art are special and unique without detracting too much from the visual muscle memory you build, we'll be okay with doing it more often. If we do, we'll start very slow. So, and it sounds like it's going to happen at some level. I mean, a couple indications there that it's coming, maybe not soon, but coming. And that usually isn't something they commit to unless it's like coming. So I think they probably have something cooked up here for alternate art of some sort. All right, so let's close it out on this question. This is one a lot of you are going to be pumped to hear, I think, because I know so many of you want a 2v2 mode in Hearthstone. I'm not quite as sold on a 2v2 mode. I think it'd be fun for like a week, but then I'd probably get bored of it. That said, hey, if you guys want it and that's something you're excited about, screw me. What do I matter? I want you guys to have fun. I'll do whatever you guys are having fun doing. So it would be kind of cool to like play with viewers or play with other streamers. So anyway, Fred Diamond, it's a sick name, says, have there ever been any plans for a multiplayer or 2v2 mode in Hearthstone? And this really shocked me. Iksar says, we've tried to brainstorm this at least 3 times that I can remember. It's mostly UI and questions around game flow. We had thought about things like simultaneous turns, but never fell in love with the gameplay of something. It's still something I could see happening. That is a shocking response to me. I know it doesn't sound like it's happening, but things like tournament mode, they've been pretty quick to like shut it down and say like, yeah, I don't know, tournament mode. They don't say things like, I could see tournament mode still happening. They kind of say like, we've given up on tournament mode. Maybe not in so many words, but it's the way it reads. This leaves the door open for a 2v2 mode. And it's clear it's something they're interested in if they've put the time in to work on it on 3 separate occasions. So somebody out there wants 2v2 mode to happen, or a large part of the team, it seems, and it's really just more about execution and figuring it out, which, if we're getting all these new game modes, there's definitely time and resources being dedicated to creating these game modes. It feels like, maybe it's not around the corner, but 2v2 mode in the next 3-5 years or something. Who knows? Yeah, if it's still on the table, if it's not just been dismissed as impossible or too hard or uninteresting, like I think tournament mode has, then 2v2 mode could happen, and that's nuts. I'm curious to see what that would look like. What do you guys think a 2v2 mode in Hearthstone would be? And is that something you care about, or are you like me and just sort of apathetic towards 2v2 mode? So, all that said, that wraps it up for another Iksar AMA. I really just do think these are awesome. I'm trying to give Iksar a lot of credit on these. It's tough to come out here. He gets hate on these a lot of the time. I didn't check this one for hate, but he's gotten hate in the past. So props for stepping out and doing it and offering insights. And frankly, talking about some tough topics too, as far as like the monetization outcry, etc. And, we're not learning like a lot of definite things out of these, but it's still interesting to see the insights behind the scenes and potential future things happening in Hearthstone. All that said, if you guys got thoughts on these, of course, share those in the comments down below. Thanks much for watching in the meantime. And until next time, game on.